Okay, this is your Chapter 9 integer addition and subtraction practice test. Um, these questions all come from page something or other in your textbook, page number 344 and 345. So the first question says, which addition uh, statement do the integer chips represent here? So these are negative. So this really represents negative 8. And this represents a positive 5. So if we think about what addition statement, it would be a negative 8 plus a positive 5. Or we could also say, if we want to do negative 8 plus 5, because this is addition, and if there is no integer sign associated with the 5, it's assumed to be positive. So both of those are correct. If we look around for those, we see that D is which one the answer is. So therefore, the answer to the first question is D. The second question says, which addition does the diagram represent? Now remember, when you're reading a number line, you're going to always start at 0. So the first number line is going to represent a negative 4, and it says addition, combined with or plus. The next one is actually this red arrow, which is going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It goes up 7, which means you're going to add 7. So negative 4 plus a positive 7 is A. Now again, you could have also said negative 4 plus 7. Those are identical answers. Question 3, which subtraction statement does the set of diagrams represent? So in the first picture, you see that you started with a negative 2. And in the second picture, you still have negative 2. All of these here are just 0 pairs, right? So the second picture still represents a negative 2. But here, we see that we are taking away 6 negatives. So we started with a negative 2, and we took away 6 negatives. And our last picture is going to be what's left over, which is the answer, and that's 4. So really, we have negative 2 take away a negative 6 equals a positive 4. So which one of those is it? Negative 2 take away a negative 6. Your answer is B. Negative 2 take away a negative 6. Question 4. Which expression equals or is the same value as negative 2 plus a positive 6? So the first thing is, what is the sum of those two? If you have 2 negatives and 6 positives, your answer would be positive 4. So really, I'm looking for which one of these has a positive 4 sum. This one has a negative 6, or negative 6 plus a positive, which is a negative 4 sum. This one has a positive 4 sum. There we go. This one here has a negative 4 sum, and this one here has a positive 8 sum. So your answer is B. Question 5, which expression has the same value as positive 4 take away negative 3? Now remember, there's two ways you could think about this. You could think of it, I have 4 positives, or it's 4 degrees in a room, temperature-wise. If I remove 3 degrees of cold air, we know that that means you're going to actually make the room warmer, which means the difference between these will be positive 7. Another way to think about that is if you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 here, and negative 1, 2, 3 here, what is the difference between them? We can clearly see that the difference between those two numbers is 7, right? Another way to think about that, because the difference, subtraction means the word difference. So the difference between a positive 4 and a negative 3 would be 7. So we're looking for answers that have a difference of positive 7. So here, if I think about the difference between negative 4, isn't that the same question? Oh, negative 3 and positive 4. This one would have a difference of negative 7, right? Because if it's negative 3 degrees, it's cold in a room. If I take away 4 degrees of warm air, it would be negative 7, it would get colder. So those are not the same. The second one, negative or positive 4 take away a positive 3. If it's 4 degrees of warm air in a room and you remove 3 degrees of warm air, it would be 1 degree in that room. The third scenario, it's 4 degrees in a room and you add to it 3 degrees of warm air. It would be positive 7, which is the same sum. I'm going to check with my last one just to make sure. Minus 4 combined with minus 3 would be minus 7. So your answer for question 5 is C. Question 6, which expression does not equal 0? So we're looking for ones that do not have 0 pairs. Now remember, for those of you who have kind of gravitated towards never subtracting and always using keeping the first integer the same, changing your subtraction to addition, and using the opposite of the second integer to get the same answer, This one here is a zero pair. So this is -3 and +3. If we think of the addition of those, you will create a zero pair. If I keep this integer, change this to addition and use the opposite, I have 3 negatives plus 3 positives, which is still 0. If I keep this first integer, change it to addition and use the opposite, I have 3 positives plus 3 negatives, which is still 0. Hopefully the last one's not 0. -3, change it to addition and use the opposite. 3 negatives and 3 more negatives is -6. So D does not equal 0. Question 7 says, one afternoon the temperature in Edmonton, Alberta was +6 degrees. The temperature then dropped by 10 degrees to reach an overnight low temperature. So if we think about this on a number line, this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is -9, etc. So it started at +6 and dropped 10 degrees. So there's dropping 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I would end up at -4 degrees temperature. If it starts at 6 degrees and it drops 10 degrees, the new temperature would be -4. If I had to write a statement for that, 6 take away 10, or +6 take away +10, if you want to put the positives in there. 6 take away 10, or +6 take away +10 is -4. Question 8. The length of the line segment joining +4, -9, and 4, 8 is how many units? So let's take a look here. So if I was to draw 1, 2, 3, 4, there is 4 on my x. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and -9 on my y. So this is 4 on my x, -9 on my y. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 4 on my x and 8 on my y. This would be 4, 8. The question says, what is the length of the line segment joining these two? So from here to here, we know is 8. From here to here, we know is 9. So the length of that line segment would be 8 plus 9, which equals 17 units. Question 9 says, what is each sum or difference? So we're going to do the additions and subtractions. The first one, it's -4 combined with -5. You have no zero pairs when you add those together. You end up with -9 as your answer. B, you're adding 3 positives to 8 negatives. Now if I want to draw that, that would be 3 positives plus 8 negatives. Those 3 positives make zero pairs with 3 of the negatives. You have 5 negatives left, which means your answer is -5 for B. For C, you have the difference between -9 and -7. So if I think about that on a number line, -7 being on a number line and -9 being on a number line, I know the difference between those two is either going to be 2 or -2. So I'm going to use my keep flip change. I'm going to keep the first integer, change it to addition, and use the opposite of the second integer, which in this case is going to be a +7 instead of a -7. Now I'm thinking addition. -9 plus +7 would be -2. Now if I want to rethink that in terms of context, it's -9 in the room. You take away 7 degrees of cold air. It becomes warmer by 7 degrees. Your answer is -2. Next question. +6 take away a -6. It's 6 degrees in the room. You take away 6 degrees of cold air. It's going to get warmer. Your answer is going to be +12. If you change to the opposite of the two. +6 plus +6 is a grade 1 question. 6 plus 6 is 12. Next question. It's 2 degrees in a room. You take away 7 degrees of warm air. It's going to get colder by 7 degrees, which means your final temperature is -5. If you keep that first integer, change it to addition, and use the opposite, you have 2 positives plus 7 negatives. That would be -5 as well. And finally, keep and change those two to their opposites. 8 positives plus 3 negatives will give you a sum of 5 positives. Question 10. A monkey climbed 6 meters down a tree and then climbed 4 meters back up. So here is our tree. It's a lovely palm tree. There's some coconuts in the tree. And the monkey, which looks like this guy right here, I think. I think it's more of a koala, but we'll just pretend I can draw. It does look like, yes, it does. So we go 6 meters down, which will be expressed by -6, and then 4 meters back up, +4. All right, so if I think about going down 6 and up 4, a -6 combined with a +4 would be a sum of -2. So ultimately, if he climbed 6 meters down and 4 meters back up, he actually went down ultimately just 2 meters from where he started from. Question 11. Determine the perimeter and area of a rectangle with the vertices. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw my coordinate plane, my Cartesian plane. Okay, so now we have our Cartesian plane. I'm going to draw C at 2, -3. That's C. I'm going to go D at -2, -3, which is right here. This is D. E is at -2, -6, which is right here, E. And 2, -6, which is right here. Now the question says, what is the perimeter and area of this rectangle? Okay, so the first thing I need to do is figure out what the width is, this one here. And since this is 1, 2, 3, I know the width of my rectangle is going to be 3 units. The length of my rectangle is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 here. So the area of a rectangle, we use the formula length times width, or 4 times 3 for area of a rectangle. And therefore the area of this rectangle will be 12 units squared. The perimeter, which is different, the perimeter is the distance around the entire object, will be 4 plus 3 plus 4 plus 3, or 7 plus 7, or 14 units long. Okay, so the perimeter of this rectangle is 14 units, and its area is 12 square units. Question 12 says the surface of Lake Michigan is 176 meters above sea level. So I'm going to draw, Lake Michigan. I'm going to draw some, maybe it's going to be like this or something like this. And then here's sea level. This is sea level, which is at 0 meters. It is sea level. And Lake Michigan, for whatever reason, is above sea level by 176 meters above sea level. But the bottom of the lake, oh, this is interesting. The bottom of the lake, right, is 105 meters below sea level. So there's, if I continue this off here, there's sea level. And this lake is 105 meters below sea level. Okay? Estimate and calculate the depth of the lake. So if this boat's up here on Lake Michigan, how deep is the lake? It would be the 176 meters above sea level and the 105 below. So remember, we're looking for the difference between them. So the difference would be the difference between 176, the difference being a subtraction, and -105. So 176, this is a positive because it's above sea level. So the difference between here and here would be a subtraction. But remember, when you subtract, you can actually add the opposite. And when we add those two opposites, we really have 176 plus 105, which is 281 meters. Okay? Now, the hard part to this question is not finding the answer. Finding the answer was easy. The hard part was realizing that this was the math that needed to be worked out, right? The difference between the lowest part of that, which was -105 below sea level, and the highest part. Okay? Question 13 says identify two integers that have a sum of 16 and differences of -8 and +8. So two numbers add together to get you negative or +16. So if I think about a +8 and a +8, those two integers have a sum of +16. But if I look at the differences, I don't get a difference of -8 and +8. So who has a suggestion for two numbers that have a sum and a difference a sum of positive 16, but a difference of negative 8 and positive 8. What do you think? So if we go 3 take away a negative 13, okay, what will that be for a sum? I'm going to keep the first integer, change that. Also a sum. We have to add them, don't we? Did you say negative 3 and negative 13? Add it? Add them together? So if we add, yeah, we're going to find the sum, though, first. Let's go with sum first. What are two numbers that have a sum of positive 16, right? So those would have a difference, you're right, but I don't think they have a sum of that. What do you think? What about 12 and 4? What about a positive 12 plus a positive 4? What's the sum of those two? Positive 16. What's the difference between those two? What's the difference of those two? Positive 8. Is that right? What about if I reverse them? What's the difference between these two? 4 take away 12 is negative 8. The answer is 12 and 4. 12 and 4 have a sum of 16, but a difference of 8 or negative 8, depending on which order you put the 4 and 12 in. Okay? So your answer for 13 is 12, positive 12, and positive 4. Question 14. In which of the following cases do you always know the sign difference? Explain your reasoning. So when you are subtracting a positive integer from a positive integer, so a positive integer from a positive integer. What kind of integer, do you know what your answer is going to be? Do you know if your answer is going to be positive or negative in this case? Or is it always different? Can it be positive or negative in both cases? If I make this a positive 3, take away a positive 8, will that answer be positive or negative? 3 take away 8, positive or negative answer? Negative. What if I did a positive 8 take away a positive 3? Is that a positive or negative? Positive. So in both those cases, I can have positive integers that I put into those positions where my answer can be negative or my answer can be positive. So here we don't know whether it's going to be positive or negative. But if we have a positive integer and we subtract a negative integer, if we subtract a negative integer from a positive integer, do I always know what kind of answer I'm going to get? Or do I not know? Let's just put some numbers in there. Let's make it a positive 6, take away a negative 2. Will that be a positive difference or a negative difference? Positive. The answer would be positive 8. What if I made it negative 12? Is that going to be positive or negative? It's going to make it negative? It's going to make it positive still, because keep, flip, and change that one. You're still going to have a positive answer. So in this case, you will always have a positive answer, a positive sum, or a positive difference. Always. No matter which answers you have, if you subtract a negative integer from a positive integer, your answer will always be positive. And if you have a negative integer and you subtract a negative integer, what kind of answer will you have? Are you sure? Let's try negative 2, take away negative 4. What's a negative 2 take away negative 4? Positive 2. So in this one, you don't know. It is possible to have a negative answer, because I can make this, if it was a negative 20 take away a negative 4, your answer would be negative. But if it was a negative 2 take away a negative 4, your answer was positive. And finally, subtracting a negative integer from a negative integer. Oh, wasn't that what we just did? Oh, yeah, that's what we just did. Hold on, no, I did that wrong. This one's the don't know. Sorry, I did that wrong. This one here, subtracting a positive integer from a negative integer, your answer will be always negative. And here's why. So if you have a negative 3, take away a positive 4. Every time you have a positive there, if you use that keep the first integer, change to addition, and use the opposite, you will always be adding two different negatives together, which means your answer will always be negative. And finally, I think the last question, is this it? Last one? The table shows the temperatures expressed in degrees Celsius and in kelvins. I think Kelvin should have been capital K, but I'm not sure. So water will boil at 100 degrees Celsius, and it will boil at 373 Kelvin degrees, I guess, or Kelvin, not degrees. Water will freeze at 0 degrees Celsius, but it'll freeze at 273 Kelvin. Absolute zero. So do you guys know what absolute zero is? Absolute zero is the temperature at which all particles stop moving, right? So I think it's only theoretical. I don't think it's actually ever happened. But if you could think about taking everything that moved in your body, all the cells, all cell growth, all the atoms, all the neutrons, everything moving, at 273 degrees, everything shuts down. There's no movement. So it's called absolute zero. And in Kelvin, that's zero. Describe the relationship between the temperature values in the two columns. So what is the difference between these two numbers? So if I was to put 0 here, 100 here, and 273 here, what's the difference here? How many degrees in difference? Anybody? Between 100 and 273, how many degrees would there be? How many numbers? Lucy? Nope. That would be 100 and 173. Oh, heavens to Betsy, this isn't a hard question. No, it's 173. Between 100 and 273 would be 173 numbers, right? Oh, 373. Oh, sorry, that's my fault. 273, correct. My number line was wrong. So there's 273 degrees between there. What about between 0 and 273? What's the difference between there? And what about the difference between these two? Just 273 numbers difference. So if it was 250 Kelvin, 250 Kelvin, what would it be in Celsius? Raise your hand. No, we're not 86. Negative is something. Negative, if it was 250 Kelvin, it would be negative 23 degrees Celsius. Okay. Why 27? 23. Yep. Okay. Stop that there.